Welcome to today's webinar, Automating and Optimizing IT Operations Management with AI. This webinar is brought to you by Express Computer, powered by IBM. I'm Shubhul Pavitran, Senior Correspondent with Express Computer and your host for the day. Intelligent IT operations are becoming a reality. Using AI and automation, ITOP teams can realize substantial gains. Now more than ever, the success of today's digital businesses depends on the performance and availability of critical applications, interconnected systems, and infrastructure. The pressure to deliver robust applications performance grows as companies continue to make substantial investments in applications and digital experiences to meet consumer and employee expectations. Helping us to understand the same are our speakers for the day, Vijay Bhaskar, Global System Integrators Lab, IBM Master Inventor, IBM India and South Asia, and Linus Lai, Vice President, Software and Services, IDC. Before I hand over to them and delve into the webinar, I'm going to read out some house rules that we'll be following during the webinar. This is an audio and video webinar being broadcast live and will be available as on demand on our website. We will have poll questions in between the webinar. I request all of you to participate for the same. We will have a round of question and answers at the end of the webinar, and you can send in your questions using the question and answer text box during the session, and the speakers will address the same based on the time after the presentation. If you face any technical issues, please try to refresh your browser or else reach out to your team using the same question text box. If any of your questions are unanswered, we will connect with you over email to answer the same. There is a survey form. This will appear in your browser once the webinar ends. We sincerely appreciate your feedback, so please do it. Giving an introduction of our speakers for the day, Linus Lai is a senior member of the Asia Pacific Software and Services Research Group. He's a founding member of IDC's Future of Digital Innovations Research Council and is on the judging panel of Australia's CIO 50. And the other speaker for the day, Mr. Vijay Bhaskar, IT Architect, GSI Labs, IBM India and South Asia. Vijay has 2 decades of experience in the IT industry, working with the MNCs and startups. His experience spans between product development, lab services, industry solutions, and global system integrator teams. He's currently focused on AIOps solutions based on IBM offerings. That's all from my side for now. Without taking more of your time, I invite Mr. Vijay and Linus to take the session forward.
Thank you so much. So my topic for today is AIOps for a resilient future enterprise. And this is quite an interesting topic because this is quite a time when we see a lot of interest in AIOps, but we really need to unpack and make sure that we, firstly, know how we can use it and use it in the right manner as well. So let me paint a background here of tremendous changes in IT priorities right since the pandemic started. We've also obviously accelerated all of our digital strategies or the execution of our digital strategies. We are now, and I know there's so much attrition happening in India as well, and demand for skills for SREs, DevOps engineers, ITOps, automation managers, platform managers, and the list goes on. You can see there's so much in this slide itself, right? And not only that, we are, and in most organizations in India now, relying on more than one cloud in a multi and hybrid cloud approach as well to our infrastructure strategies. So here we are today. I also want to touch a little bit about what's happening from an application portfolio as well. We've seen a rise of much more applications, over the past as well. And this is not necessarily because we're just, buying more package applications. In fact, we're actually doing the reverse. We're simplifying, right, our package and horizontal applications portfolios to cloud and SaaS portfolios as much as possible. I know I've written a case in India a couple of months ago, which was Western Digital, and how it actually simplified, its whole of enterprise applications portfolio. But what is actually happening here is we're building much more custom bespoke applications, which are giving us, right, the differentiation that we need, right, over the competition. And this is over and above your standard horizontal applications. And as we become software innovators in our own right, as we, every company becomes a software company, right? We find that some of these applications are very, very performance oriented. They rely on, infrastructure at the edge where customers are located. And they can have a very, very high interdependency on other services with other applications or other cloud services as well. So it becomes a really, really complex situation here, right? As we move our applications away from our data center into remote and cloud data centers as well. Now, one of the things that IDC has done was to publish a very, very simple paper on what we deem as the future of digital infrastructure is going to look like over the next 5 years. Now, we've seen obviously that huge shift to cloud. So, that's been happening over the last 10, 20 years. For example, Salesforce is a 20-year-old company. And then, but when you look at the future of digital infrastructure framework, we're only simplifying it into 3 very distinct pillars, right, that we need to master. The first one is the ability to deploy infrastructure anywhere. That's what we call ubiquitous deployment. While it sounds easy, the trick is to make it as quickly and agile as possible and as standard as possible as well, right? The next one, and that's the largest one there in the middle, is the whole idea of autonomous operations, right? And lastly, cloud-centric technology. So whatever we're doing, whether we're building infrastructure in our own data centers, purchasing new server and storage, looking at cloud infrastructure, we all want to make sure that we use cloud-centric technologies because they then also offer a fair amount of resource optimization, but standardization as well. But let me focus on the one in the middle, right? And to illustrate that point is a very simple article here, which you can search yourself or click on the link at some other time. And it goes on to describe this 90-meter wall, right, that you see in the background there, at the back of Janelle. And what Westpac has done was to put all of their operations teams into a physical space, right? So there's server operations, network operations, storage operations, applications, databases, etc. They're all sort of like in one central place. Now, the reason they had done so was they found there were tremendous benefits, right, of just having them housed physically in the same place. Collaboration went up, obviously. The ability to do root cause analysis and the speed at which they could collaborate to do so increased tremendously as well. But that wasn't the only reason, right? Because at the end of the day, we're starting to gravitate towards this notion of AIOps, right? And if we're going to do AIOps well, it can't be just done, right, at as a certain stack, right? It has to be done from the application all the way down. And there's a reason to that, right? Because today, when we look at our SLAs, they are no longer the types of SLAs that we are used to, right? Around serviceability, availability, or reliability, etc. The kind of SLAs that we're living with now is, our customer is actually going to, stop transacting with us, if we don't resolve, some of the things that they're experiencing within 2 seconds or less, all right? 4 seconds and you got 20% drop off. 8 seconds and you've got 80% drop off. So we're dealing with real performance issues right now that needs to be resolved over and above our usual SLAs. So that's why it matters. And our prediction is that by 2023, 75% of global 2,000 IT organizations will adopt automated operations to transform their workforce, right, to support IT at an unprecedented scale. Okay, so we all know what AIOps is, hopefully. That's why you're here. But let's break it down into the 7 components that we have identified as, the roadmap to AI ops, right? On one hand, you've got telemetry and data ingestion, and right on the other end of the extreme spectrum is auto remediation and incidents avoidance. This is sort of like machines controlling machines, that sort of nirvana, right? But in between, there are obviously many flavors, right, and many capabilities needed, right? Event correlation and intelligent alarm management is a popular one. Visualization, of course. Recently, in recent times, automated root cause analysis, as well as training and guided remediation as well. But I tell you what, we've actually done a survey over the last 2 years, and we've got some interesting results. And here's just a sample of what features are important to users over the years. So when we compare last year's results with this year's results, we find that things like automated root cause analysis, which is very, very, very popular because obviously you could spend days, right, just trying to figure out, was it the application, the database, the middleware, the virtual machines, or the server, or the storage that was wrong, that created the fault, or the user experience is now compressed into minutes, if not seconds, right, through AI and ML capabilities. But we've also started to notice a trend in that 7th area that I talked about, automated remediation and outage avoidance, where previous years, most IT ops managers would be hesitant to allow that to happen. They'll go so far as to say, okay, we'll allow AIOps to give us the recommendations, but we will flick the switch. We will, enact those configuration changes to happen ourselves manually. But now I think we have a little bit more appetite, it looks like, for machines controlling machines. Very interesting. I hope we have a very interesting conversation later about that. When we look at it by geographies, and you can see here the results for India, visualization and reporting is obviously still king there. And then automated root cause analysis is second. That's actually a sign of quite a mature state. You've also got a high interest in prediction and trend identification and recommended actions, and of course, intelligent alarm management. So over time, I do think that the green bar will increase. If you look at it across organization sizes, it's easy to see here that the larger you are, the more you will use AIOps, right? Particularly in the areas of automated root cause analysis, prediction, and trend identification and recommended actions, as well as intelligent alarm management. However, there are also challenges, right? Because when we look at what we're doing today, there are still some problems and some challenges that needs to be overcome. First and foremost is the interoperability between tools, right? Because we've got many, many tools in very many examples. If you're using, say, an AWS cloud, you tend to use, obviously AWS management and ITOps tools. And if you're using your own private cloud, you tend to use a different vendor's tools as well. And then you've got usability and visualization challenges as well, because again, shifting from one to another, across a hybrid estate, right, can need a lot of skills and a lot of training. And then lastly, the fragmentation of tools as well. And this is, not to do with the interoperability between tools, but just the fact that, you've got a lot of tools, right? And you have to be able to, like I said, again, move from one to another just to do root cause analysis, for example. Again, when you look at it from an India perspective, and this is quite unique to India, you'll see the yellow one really, really be more prominent, and that's a lack of built-in automation as well, on top of all of the problems that I mentioned earlier. So with that, I'd like to very quickly end and summarize my presentation with a reminder, with a call, for a future which states that in this future, we're looking at very, very different metrics. Remember when virtualization first came about, many, many years ago? we obviously drove so much productivity, right, in the way that we operate and manage infrastructure. Today, we're going to have much more new benchmarks. So by 2022, for example, infrastructure outages and penalties associated with the misplacements of applications and unauthorized access to data can even account for 30% of all material revenue and earnings shortfalls. 40% of companies will have to incorporate digital resiliency metrics into board-level dashboards by as early as next year, right, as we become much more reliant on our digital infrastructure. And then in terms of speed, scale, and resiliency, we know that now we're migrating towards more container and microservices architecture does create a good benefit of reducing infrastructure per app investment needs by 60%. But then again, it does create some complexity in the way that we're going to tie those metrics to optimization, resiliency, and ongoing enhancement. So with that, I thank you so much for your attention, and I'd like to pass it over to Vijay.
Thank you, Linus.
Thank you so much, Mr. Linus, for an extremely well-informed presentation, sir. Now, can we have the poll questions?
Sure, Shibu.
Are you using any AIOps tools in your organization? The options are yes or no.
I hope the question has popped up on everybody's screen.
I ask the audience to please participate for this poll questions, requesting all.
Okay.
So,
thanks, Shibu. I think I can see the poll result.
Okay.
So
yes, sir, please carry on.
Thank you. So I see that about 72% of the members from the audience, they said that they are not using any AIOps tool. So let's just quickly, I'll take about 25 minutes of your time to talk about AIOps from IBM perspective. And I'll quickly introduce a couple of products from the AIOps portfolio, which can give a perspective of what they can offer. So it'll complement whatever Mr. Linus has explained about in his wonderful introductory session. And just to set the context, the IT environments are getting more and more complex. So the enterprises, as a part of the enterprises, the line of business is trying to introduce new services to their customers, while the IT teams are trying to retain the stability and not take any risks as far as the new application environments are concerned. Also, the enterprises are moving their workloads from on-prem to different public clouds. And as a part of the drive, they're recruiting specialized teams who can operate different kinds of tools to monitor or manage these different environments. But still, there could be incidents anywhere in any of these environments. And at the end of the day, the teams need to come together to find out where the issues are and resolve them. So for example, if the customer calls up and says like, hey, your website is very slow, or somebody calls up and says like, I'm not able to complete the transaction from the mobile application. So the SRE has the challenge of bringing all the different team members, the siloed teams, using their respective tools to the table, and with their help, with all those tools, figure out where the problem is and try to resolve it quickly. So that's where the enterprises are looking for appropriate tools, which can look into diverse environments, which can understand about different technology stacks, and also leverage AI and automation to make their IT operations effective. So that's where a couple of products from IBM AIOps portfolio, that is IBM's Instana and Turbonomic, comes into picture. So Instana is an enterprise observability platform, which provides real-time understanding of the application environments. And with the help of agents, it can discover the various IT resources along with their relationships, and it can provide the health and performance of these individual technical components or the overall application environment at any given point in time. So once the discovery ends, the observability begins. So with the help of agents and appropriate sensors, Instana can collect all the important observability information, including metrics, traces, logs, and other such information. And it can push all this information to the backend Instana server, where all this data gets contextualized and presented to different roles in the IT organization for effective consumption as a part of their day-to-day tasks. So with this, Instana can help in solving all the technical issues. So be it about the bad code, which is crashing very often, be it about the unoptimized queries which are sent to the databases, be it about non-availability of any of the components in the application architecture. So it could be the databases, or it could be the messaging engines, which could go down all of a sudden and cause problems in the application environments. Or it could be wrong configuration in between any of the two components in the application architecture. So Instana can help in quickly figuring out where the problem is in all these cases and help the SRE or the ops team to quickly fix the problem. And if you talk about specific use case of the website going slow, which is quite a common problem which is reported by the customers. So the issue could be because of the resources or the lack of it in any of the layers of the application stack. So probably the IOPS, which is configured as a part of the storage for that particular application, and for the given traffic is not good enough. Or maybe the resources which are allocated for the virtual machines, be it the CPU or the memory, it's not right enough. Or the memory which is allocated for the application servers is not good enough for the given traffic. So how do we find out where this resource crunch is and resolve that issue quickly? That's where IBM's Turbonomic comes into picture. It can look into the target environments, understand the full stack of that application in that environment, and also understand about the relationship between different entities and obtain the metrics for these different entities. And using appropriate machine learning algorithms, it can calculate in real time and identify the resources which are required at different layers of the application stack to match the incoming demand for that application. So we can, when Turbonomic provides the appropriate recommended actions, as Linus mentioned, one of the key tenets of the AIOps capabilities. And through these recommended actions, which are primarily about the resourcing actions, we can identify and also execute the actions from within the context of Turbonomic to resolve the issues and ensure continuous application performance. So that's in a nutshell about Instana and Turbonomic. Just to zoom into Instana a bit, this slide talks about the big picture of Instana. It's an enterprise observability platform. And if you come from left to right, so on the left-hand side, what we see is various sources, which are the technical components, which are present as a part of different environments, be it on-prem or the public clouds. So Instana, with the help of agents, can collect different metrics, traces, and the logs information from these different technology components and send them across to the server. So the Instana server collects all that information, stores it, and processes the information in real time and uses them in a lot of capabilities. So one important characteristic of Instana is because it obtains the traces from all the technology components, it understands which service is interacting with which other service on what endpoints, and it stitches together all that information on the server side and prepares what is known as a dynamic service graph. This is the crux of Instana, and this graph is leveraged in most of the capabilities of Instana further. So when we talk about the capabilities, there are dashboards which readily available, which provide KPI dashboards readily, which realize the golden signals. And there are wonderful visualizations in terms of charts and graphs. There is an alerting engine which can be leveraged along with its 250 plus inbuilt events and also the event correlation. So there is unbound analytics. We can slice and dice the data from different perspectives just using the UI of the Instana's web console. And as the name says, Instana, it stands for Instant Analytics. So there is rich amount of analytics available in Instana. And there is also distributed tracing, which can help in troubleshooting and automated root cause analysis as well. So all these capabilities are leveraged in the context of different use cases, be it for end user monitoring in case of the websites and mobile applications, be it for monitoring the application servers, databases, and messaging engines, or be it about Kubernetes platform monitoring or the infrastructure monitoring. So also Instana, with the help of the readily available agents and sensors, it can manage the services available on different public clouds, including the managed services like RDS and serverless environments like AWS Lambda. So all these capabilities are surfaced through the Instana Web Console and can be used by different roles in the organization as a part of their day-to-day tasks. And if you need to talk about three big things with respect to Instana, that would be automation, context, and intelligent insights. And automation, it's all about deployment of the agents into different environments. And each agent, when it runs on a VM, it can identify or discover all the technology components automatically, and then download the sensors and attach them with the appropriate technology components so that the observability information can be picked up from each of them. So the overall deployment and management of these agents on the remote environments can be completely automated. And the next one is the context. For the SRE to look into any environment and understand if an incident occurs as to where the problem is and find out the root cause of the problem, first of all, he needs to traverse or navigate through different layers of the architecture. And either it could be from left to right or from top to bottom when we talk about going through the technology components in a specific layer. So there are plenty of screens in the Instana console, which can help the SRE to get all that context to go through the length and breadth of the application architecture and do the appropriate root cause analysis. And last but not least is the intelligent insights. So if there is one problem and because of which multiple events are generated, so Instana has the intelligence to correlate all those relevant events into one incident so that the SRE can just look at that incident and traverse in that path to quickly analyze where the problem is and solve it quickly. So these are the three broad capabilities of Instana. And if you talk about a specific problem from the customer, so again, going back to the use case of website being very slow. So this is the icon which the customer sees on the screen. And at the back end, the reason could be anything. It could be because of the bad code. It could be because of incorrect configuration, or it could be because of the lack of resources with a specific entity in the application architecture. So how does the SRE or the ops team member get to figure out where the problem is and resolve it? So typically in any IT environment, there would be different teams using different tools in different layers of the application stack. So if such a problem occurs where there is a lack of resources in any of the layers of the application stack, bringing all these teams together and making them use their respective tools and figure out where the resource crunch is not a mean task. So that's where Turbonomic comes into picture. It can look into the target environment and it can provide the full stack visibility of the environment through this supply chain diagram, as they call it in Turbonomic. So starting with the business application on the top, through the transaction services and application components or containers, which run on different VMs, and these VMs running on different hosts, and appropriate storage being associated with these VMs, and also the networks associated with those VMs. So this entire information, top to bottom, the full stack of that application environment is represented through this supply chain diagram by Turbonomic. So not only that, it also understands about the relationship between different entities. And by fetching the metrics for each of these entities across all the layers of the application stack, it also uses the machine learning algorithms and these metrics which are captured from different entities to calculate the amount of resources which are required at different layers in this application environment to ensure continuous application performance. And wherever it sees performance risks, it puts the appropriate recommended actions And those actions, if they are executed by the SRE or the ops team member, the application performance can be restored. So in a nutshell, Turbonomic provides the full stack visibility, and also it provides recommended actions across the entities in all the layers of the application stack. And by executing those actions, we can, restore the application performance. So if you just double click on Instana, on Turbonomic a bit. So on the right-hand side, what we see is an application environment. So typically it contains entities from different vendors and different layers. So the applications, for example, could be running on any of the application servers and leveraging any of the databases. And these entities could be running on VMs directly as a part of any virtualized environment from different vendors, or they could be running as containers. Similarly, there could be compute, storage, and network elements from different vendors as a part of the application environment. So once we install Turbonomic, so we can point Turbonomic to these different entities in different layers of this application stack. And once Turbonomic fetches all this information, it can prepare this supply chain diagram to provide the full stack visibility of the application environment. And also it identifies the appropriate resources which are required at different layers to match the incoming demand or traffic for that application. So these actions which are identified by Turbonomic can be executed manually, or by defining appropriate policies, we can automate the execution of these actions completely. So in case the actions need to invoke some scripts or playbooks or runbooks at the backend, there is a framework in Turbonomic which supports that. And most of the enterprises would not want these actions to be executed just like that by anyone at any time. So they would want these actions which are recommended by Turbonomic before they are executed to flow through certain workflows. So that's where the integration of Turbonomic with ServiceNow comes into picture. So we can leverage the workflows in change management module of ServiceNow to bring in those workflows. So in such case, so any action which is recommended by Turbonomic, so once the SRE decides to execute it, it has to flow through the workflow, and appropriate stakeholder has to approve it before it can be executed. And also there is a good amount of API exposed by Turbonomic, which can be leveraged to present the information as a part of any third-party or enterprise applications. And just to mention one important point in this context, there is no agent that needs to be deployed on the target side, except for Kubernetes. So for all other entities, it's just a matter of configuration from the Turbonomic side, and Turbonomic leverages the API, which is exposed by that specific target to pick up all the necessary information. So this is the screenshot from the Turbonomic web console, which shows the supply chain diagram on the left-hand side for one specific business application. So each entity in this full stack is represented through a circle, and the color coding around the circle indicates the type of actions which are recommended by Turbonomic. So green indicates that everything is healthy. So red indicates that there is a performance risk, and yellow or orange indicates that there is an opportunity for improving the efficiency or something related to the compliance. So SRE can look at all the actions which are listed like this by Turbonomic, go through them one by one and execute them from within the context of Turbonomic. He can do that manually, or he could have defined policies by which these actions which are recommended by Turbonomic gets executed automatically. So just to give a glimpse of how the actions which are prescribed by Turbonomic looks like. So for example, in the application component layer of this particular business application, it has identified that the heap in that application component is underutilized. So the recommendation is to resize down the heap from 4 GB to 3.8 GB. So it's not necessary that the resources are inadequate all the time. So it is possible that that there might have been oversizing done for that environment, and Turbonomic can always do the calculations based on ML machine learning algorithms and identify the right amount of resources required to match the incoming demand. So that way, it does provide recommendations to increase or decrease the resources so that the environment gets right-sized. And as a part of such recommendations, there would be substantial savings as well, especially in cloud environments. So again, if we go down one level and look at the recommendations at the virtual machine level, so here it's all in red color. So there is lack of enough resources at that layer to match the incoming traffic. So the recommendation is to resize the vCPUs and move it from 4 to 5 for a couple of VMs in this layer. And similarly in the storage, so it has identified that there is a storage provisioned congestion, and the recommendation is to resize up the storage and increase it from 320 to 364 terabytes. So these actions can be executed by the SRE or ops team members, either manually or they could be completely automated as well. So the SRE can always click on a specific action and get into the details corresponding to that action. So especially, if we talk about a use case wherein the recommendation is to move the virtual machine from one host to the other host. So in that case, SRE would want to see what would be the impact of that. So how would the resource configuration look like on both these hosts once that movement is done. So actually, if we expand any specific action as a part of the details, Turbonomic also gives such post-action execution projections. So whereby SRE can get an idea as to what would happen if that action is executed. So that will help decide the SRE whether to take that action or not. And so far we have seen Turbonomic being used in real-time environments wherein it obtains all the relevant information using machine learning algorithms. It does calculations and provides the recommended actions which are related to the resourcing at different layers of the environment. So also Turbonomic can be used as a part of the planning exercise where we can do a lot of what if analysis. So especially in ITOps transformations or cloud migration projects where the enterprise is planning to move some of the workloads from on-prem to any of the public clouds. So that planning or that what if analysis can be done with the help of the planning section in Turbonomic console. So in this case, the inputs to the plan are to move the 190 virtual machines from one cluster, which is on-prem, to the AWS public cloud. And we can specify the other parameters as well, specify whether we should include the OS cost or not and other reserved instance settings and all. So based on all these inputs, the Turbonomic can give the plan options, one for lift and shift and the other for the optimized version of the plan. So in case of lift and shift, it just tries to find the matching virtual machines and the storage volumes on the target public cloud. And in case of optimized plan, it provides a lot of recommended actions because Turbonomic already understands about this on-prem environment. It has been observing the behavior of that system for quite some time. So it understands about the incoming traffic. It understands about the resources which are required at different layers of the this particular application environment. It provides the appropriate recommended actions as a part of the plan as well. And if we, in this particular case, so as we can see, if you go with the optimized plan, there could be 24K USD savings. So that's one way. That's another way in which Turbonomic can be used. It's not just for cloud migrations. We can use it for a lot many other scenarios to optimize the clusters, container clusters, to optimize the cloud environments or the entire on-prem environments. Or if you want to add additional VMs on a host, or if there is a hardware refresh happening, and the SRE or the ops team lead or the cloud ops teams wants to look at how the configuration of the VMs look like once that hardware is refreshed. They can do all such what-if scenarios with Turbonomic. So just to summarize and quickly talk about the value prop of these two IBM Ops offerings that we talked about, that is Instana and Turbonomic. With the features like unbound analytics and distributed tracing and the ability to navigate through different layers of the architecture and dynamic graph. So it is possible to quickly identify the issues in diverse technology environments and resolve those production incidents quickly. And we don't need to wait till things break, especially when it comes to resources. Turbonomic can continuously look into the target environments and understand about the resource requirements at different layers. And it can provide the recommended actions which can be automated to ensure the continuous application performance. So that in fact improves the availability of those components as well. So with all the features in Instana and Turbonomic, we can achieve good amount of operational efficiency, be it from a time and effort perspective, or especially from resource utilization perspective. As we have seen, Turbonomic can look into the target environments and can right size the environments to match the incoming traffic for that business application. And one of the challenges which the DevOps or the SREs have is in deploying new changes into the production environment. So there are features in Instana wherein we can provide appropriate release markers with which all the KPI dashboards which are readily available can show that marker, and it is possible to view by the SRE or the DevOps in one glance and understand if there are any issues because of these changes being deployed into the production environment with that new release of the application component. And as we have seen, Turbonomic, either in case of real-time environments or in case of the planning phase, it can provide the resourcing actions on continuous basis. And if the traffic is less, it'll talk about adjusting the resources at different layers and cut down all the resources so that there is a mean and lean environment which can still provide good application performance. And when it comes to cloud spend, it can take into consideration not just the traffic, and also it can take into consideration the reserved instances settings. It can take into consideration the various savings plans available in that public cloud, and it can provide an optimized plan with recommended actions, take into consideration all those settings. So if there are some unused resources, say for example, there are storage volumes which are unused, and they're not attached to any of the VMs also. So Turbonomic can detect such unused volumes as well and talk about pruning all those volumes. So there are many ways in which Turbonomic can provide the action recommendations to cut down on the infrastructure as well as the associated cloud spend for that. I'll just take another 5 minutes to quickly take you through demo, which shows how Instana and Turbonomic can come together to solve the problems with a particular e-retailer website. So as we know, Instana is an enterprise observability platform, and it can provide real-time understanding of the application environment. Whereas Turbonomic can look into the target environment and provide the full stack visibility. And especially it can understand about the resource requirements at various layers, and it tries to match these resources to the incoming traffic for that application. And by executing those actions, we can get continuous application performance. So on a particular season sale, the users for this e-retailer application or website, they're having bad experience. So Instana is already monitoring this website and also the backend application stack. And it detects a problem already. It correlates all the events and creates an incident and sends an alert to the SRE. And once the SRE receives the alert, he logs into the Instana console, checks for all the relevant information. And then he also identifies that it could be a potential resource issue with one of the microservices. So he logs into Turbonomic to check the health of the application and also the resource utilization, and check out the various actions which are recommended by Turbonomic. So this is the Instana console. So when the SRE logs in, he sees that there is an incident which is being reported by Instana. And from website perspective, the e-retailer application is not showing any issues. Everything is in green. But from when it comes to the backend, of that same e-retailer application, there is something wrong. So that's why there is this red circle over there. So he can drill down into that specific backend application, and it provides him this these ready-made KPI dashboards, which basically realizes the golden signals. He can see the traffic in terms of calls, the error rates, and latency, and he can already come to conclusion that there is something wrong because the error rate is about 20%. He can also visualize the appropriate infrastructure changes and issues at the same time, which are happening in that specific application. He can also check out the dynamic dependency graph, which is generated by Instana and updated continuously. So as of now, this is how the graph is looking like. And as we can see, there is some problem with the orders microservice of this application. So he can check out the issue, which is being reported by Instana. So what he can see is various events which are triggered. And this particular event, which talks about the performance issue, is active for the last 28 minutes. So there are many other events. So it's a little difficult for the SRE to comprehend what could have gone wrong in this context. So you can switch to the incident tab where all the relevant events are correlated, and the incident timeline is shown by Instana. So along with one key triggering event, which is the probable cause of that event, and many other related events as well. So some of these events are grayed out, indicating that they expired, but still Instana found them to be relevant in this context as a part of this incident. So that there is a spike which is shown as a part of the latency for that application. And SRE can look at all the relevant events as well. He finds that the front end and a couple of other microservices have been going down. So it could be because of a problem with the code anywhere in those microservices, or it could be a potential resource issue as well. So you can see that even the cards microservice was going down, and both front end and cards depend on the orders microservice. So if he looks at the details of the microservice, orders microservice, he sees that the error rate has been 100% for quite some time. So he suspects that there could be a potential resource issue. So that's when the SRE decides to switch to the Turbonomic console. And Turbonomic, as we discussed earlier, it provides the entire supply chain diagram for the target environment. And after it obtains the metrics and does its calculations, it has identified that there are about 135 scaling actions which can be taken in all those environments to improve the performance or efficiency in those environments. And the SRE can go through, go to the next level by clicking on the applications, transactions, or services. So because he already identified from Instana that there could be something wrong with the orders microservice, he looks at the recommendations from the orders microservice perspective in Turbonomic. So there are two actions which are recommended for this application, and this is the stack, full stack for that particular application, all the way from, for that service, all the way from the service to the VM and associated containers. So there are two scaling actions recommended by Turbonomic in this case, and the SRE can see that it's related to the performance. So that's why it was red in color. He can expand and look at all the details, and he can see that right now the utilization is 100%. That's why it's recommending the vCPUs allotted for that container to be changed from 50 millicores to 58 millicores. So all that SRE needs to do is just select the checkbox for that action and click on apply selected. And from within the context of Turbonomic, he can execute that action. And at the backend, that resource would be updated for that container. Then he goes back to Instana after some time and checks to see that everything is in green. So the website is okay. The backend application stack is all okay. And he goes into the dependency diagram. Now he can see the full dependency diagram corresponding to that application. And there are no issues reported against the orders microservice as well. So that's in brief about how Instana and Turbonomic can come together and ensure that there is continuous application performance for the applications running in any of the environments. Shubha, are there any questions from audience? Hi, Shibu. Are there any
Hi.
questions from audience?
Yes, sir. There's one, starting with a question from the audience. There's first question from Sanjeev Kumar Indra Pratap Singh. His question is this product similar to App Dynamics?
Right. So if we talk about, we talked about two products here, Instana and Turbonomic. So if you talk about Instana, it's the enterprise observability platform. And yes, it is in the lines of App Dynamics, Dynatrace, Datadog, and other such platforms, but it has its own strengths.
So one more question. Hello.
Mm-hmm.
The question is by Sanjeev Kumar Indra Pratap Singh. One more question. Is it compulsory to use Instana and Turbonomic together?
Okay, good question. So we talked about Instana as well as Turbonomic, and also the demo was with respect to a specific use case where these two can come together. But it is not mandatory that only Instana needs to be used with Turbonomic always. So in that particular application environment, if the enterprise has some other APM or observability tool, be it App Dynamics or Dynatrace, then the Turbonomic can be configured with those APM tools as well, and the appropriate data feed can be obtained from those tools as well. But from IBM perspective, Instana is the enterprise observability platform, and that goes well with Turbonomic.
Okay, sir. Before we move to the next question, we have just another one poll question left. So can we take it?
Sure, Shibu. I'm just looking at the poll result for the last question that you posted. Okay. And looks like 50% of the members are saying like they are using 1 to 5 tools. So which is in fact good.
All right.
Yeah.
I was also impressed that that's actually 2. They said that they're using 15 plus.
Yes.
Pretty impressive. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I think anything greater than 5, it is slightly challenging to use so many tools and manage the environments. So that's where, as Linus mentioned, so the AIOps capabilities, could be leveraged. So today we just talked about Instana and Turbonomic. In fact, as a part of the AIOps portfolio, IBM has another product called What's in AIOps. So it can integrate with all the existing tools, be it infrastructure monitoring or the application monitoring or the storage monitoring, and can get the feeds from these different tools. And it can get the feed from logs also. And using the inbuilt AI ML models, it can analyze all these data feeds and derive appropriate insights. So the insight is basically an incident which is happening in the environment as of now, and it can notify the SRE or the ops team member with all the supporting and evidence data so that they can confirm the problem and then start looking into it and quickly resolve it. Yes, Shibu, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Vijay and Mr. Linus, for the informative presentation on the key aspects that organizations need to keep in mind. I now open the floor to the questions. I request everyone to use the question and answers text box to send in their questions, and I will take them one by one till the time permits. So the first question is for Mr. Vijay Bhaskar. If an enterprise already has App Dynamics, Dynatrace, or any other APM tool, do they still need to get an Instana as well along with Turbonomic?
Right. I think this is a repetition, but the answer is it is not necessary to have both the products as a part of the solution. If the enterprise, they already have App Dynamics or Dynatrace, so Turbonomic can integrate with those tools as well.
All right, so perfect. And so there's one question for Mr. Linus. The question is, can we really trust machines to make configuration changes? This is the question.
Machines controlling machines. I think we need to be careful when we watch these science fiction movies. But generally, we are approaching that reality. As you saw in the survey results, more organizations today actually a little bit more confident in allowing these changes to happen, particularly if you have defined a use case that you want to use them with particularly well, right? So if you're using an e-commerce website or mobile application, it'd be a lot easier than trying to generalize things. And of course, if you have very high dependencies on cloud services, or in some cases, even higher application dependencies, like in the 60 to 70% dependencies with other applications and other services, it might be a little bit more complex to allow machines to make those changes. And you might not want to have the confidence to do so, but at least have, like, in the demo that you see, machines provide recommendations for you to manually go through them to see whether that makes sense to you or not.
Thank you so much. That's all the time we have for today. I thank Mr. Vijay and Mr. Linus for sharing your precious insights. And to know more, you can get in touch with IBM team. The contact details are displayed on your screen. And we thank you. We thank a lot. Thank you, audience, for your interest and time. Please do remember to fill in the survey form at the end of the webinar. It will appear in your browser. We will look forward to welcoming you all for our next webinar, which will happen very soon. Take care and have a splendid day ahead. Thank you.